Hey, my name is Brian, that is Shane, and this is the Popcast, and today we're talking about, well, Star Trek Discovery, but it's a little more than that. Where does Star Trek Discovery fall into the timeline? What's going to happen in Season 2? We have a couple theories, and we're going to do a very detailed look at the timeline from Zefram Cochrane meeting the Vulcans all the way to the rebooted Kelvin timeline, and where the Discovery falls within that, and some possible problems that we think that we have found with this. Mixies presents the Popcast. Shane, how you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm doing great, man. I got to tell you, everybody needs to buckle up and get ready for this because, following a disappointing finale, we need to discuss the direction and where this is going and what's the point and all that good stuff. So Brian spent a whole lot of time putting together some information. I found some stuff, and let's go and just hammer this thing out and get to the nitty gritty.
All right, let's do it. Before we get into that, don't forget our 1600 sub challenge. Get down there, like, comment, subscribe. We're super close, and it's going to be an amazing giveaway. If you don't know exactly what that is, go ahead and check out our playlist for giveaways, and you can see the last thing we gave away. Also, this episode...
Yeah.
What's that?
I got one thing after this.
This episode is brought to you by Vulcan in the Streets, Klingon in the Sheets. Use coupon code Shane or Brian for 30% off. And this has also taught me that everybody here likes Shane a lot more than me. Anyways.
Not true. Not true.
I'm just saying, one coupon code for me, all the rest for you. Okay.
Well, that was me that bought that one and put your name in there.
Even worse, Shane. Okay. All right. Moving on.
Wait, I got one thing.
What's that?
So, this is the last video. This is it for the special boxing video that goes to one lucky sweaty nerd or non-sweaty girl nerd out there. Basically, we got about $250 worth of craziness that's going to go in a box for one person, and this is the final video for that. So, get your comments in here, subscribe here. We select people who are subscribers and who comment on the video, and that's who gets to be in our big Royal Rumble to see who's going to get this pretty cool prize for just a side thing. $250 worth of stuff is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So
this is like a side giveaway. This isn't even the main giveaway.
It isn't even the big one.
This isn't the sub giveaway. This is just because you and I like to have an excuse to hang out and throw things around and have fun and give things away. So that's all this is.
I gotta show. Can I show one thing?
One thing, because everybody here wants to talk about the timeline.
Okay, just one thing really quick. Oh, that's too cool. Okay, I'm just gonna bring it up here a little bit. See, I'm not gonna go too much into it.
What?
But it's
what?
Okay.
Bro, you're giving that away? I thought that was for me.
No.
All right, let's talk about the timeline. We're gonna start at the very beginning of all this madness. We already know what happened in our history, but the start of Star Trek, the real start of Star Trek, was when Zefram Cochrane launched the first warp ship from that missile, and it triggered the Vulcans to come meet us, and we had first contact with the Vulcans, according to Star Trek 2063. Which, there are people listening to this that will see the year 2063. So.
Whoa.
You
guys are going to get to meet Vulcans.
Crazy as that. Now, you guys remember, it wasn't just Zefram Cochrane launching it, because remember the movie First Contact. The TNG crew came back in time to stop the Borg from ambushing the Vulcan human meet up and changing our timeline forever because they saw humans as such a huge threat to the Borg collective. So there's some timeline in this. There's some time travel in this timeline. So it's very important that you point out the moments where they time traveled and affected the timeline a little bit. Obviously, TNG was just getting the timeline back on track. They had not, and they didn't actually change anything. But it's still a point of reference that we should talk about.
Bro, that's an awful screenshot. Just want to say.
Yeah, I wanted to get a shot of them going to warp, and this was the only screenshot I can get.
Look at Jonathan Frakes back there going,
It wasn't 1080p when this movie came out, I don't think.
Gotcha. Well, it was still enjoyable.
All right. Now, in the year 2151, the Enterprise NX-01 with Captain Jonathan Archer launched.
Okay. So that was basically 88 years later.
Right. Okay. In 2155, only 4 years later, we started the Earth-Romulan War.
Those darn Romulans.
They were threatened by our success and our expansion, so they attacked.
Fair enough.
This is from the original series, showing the neutral zone. The Romulan War continued for quite some time, but it had cooled down by the time we got to the original series, and there was a neutral zone set up, and there was a sort of like, right now in North Korea and South Korea, there's like a dead area where you're not supposed to go. Same concept.
Yes, it's called the DK. It's called the zone of debarkation. You go in there, you die.
Right. Okay. Next up, we have the United Federation of Planets being founded in 2161.
So 6 years after the Romulan War.
Yes. Now, this is a pretty important point, because 100 years later, after the Federation was founded, the events of Star Trek Discovery took place.
Okay, so what we're watching right now with Discovery is 100 years after UFP.
Right. Well, about 100 years, yeah. About 100 years later, Discovery takes place. It's like 5 years or something like that. Okay.
And just to put that in perspective for people here, 100 years ago for us would have been World War I. So that gives you some perspective in time, maybe.
So Discovery started the moment we met Burnham and Giorgio on the Shenzhou, and when the Klingon War started, is about 100 years after the Federation is founded. Okay. Now, this is where it gets really tricky, because literally 9 years later is when when Kirk starts his 5-year mission. So when we see, not even the pilot, like the actual first episode of Kirk starting his 5-year mission is 2265, 9 years after the start of the events of Discovery. This your head starts to hurt here.
So can we just slow down for a second? And we didn't really indicate why we're showing the timeline or what the purpose is. Can we kind of tell everybody why we're doing this?
Well, because we have a theory. We have some theories about season 2. We have some questions about season 2, but we need to also address some problems that that we've already seen and we're going to be seeing going from Discovery forward into season 2 because of the timeline. There's some timeline issues here.
So we need to understand the timeline if we're going to talk about season 2, right?
Yeah. Now it looks like, hey, we still have 9 years before TOS. We have plenty of Discovery left, but that's not the case. Around 18 months has passed already for Discovery. Remember, they went 9 months into the future when they came back, and we were already 9 months after, if I remember correctly. By the way, this information is not easy to come by. I watched hours and hours of clips last night, and I'm still a little wanky on exactly how long we are into the Discovery timeline. But 2256 is when we started. Definitely 9 months had passed, and then another 9 months when they got thrown into the future.
So you can safely say we're in 2257 at the very minimum.
At the very minimum, we're in 2257. At the maximum, we're in 2258. So it's between, it's between 17 and 22 months. Let's just say 18 months, right? So we're already almost 2 years in to this, which means there's only 6 years remaining. But I'm sorry, 6 or 7 years. But that's actually not true either. There's more than it's even worse than that. We don't even have 6 or 7 years, according to, by the time we get this on the timeline, you'll see where it really starts to fall apart. And I'm concerned with what universe we're in right now, because I don't even know if we're in the Prime universe, to be honest.
And that's one of the things we're going to discuss.
So, you remember TOS? Kirk fighting the Gorn. Yeah. Okay.
Oh my gosh, dude, really? Dude.
Show me what you got.
Else going in the box.
Oh my God. You are putting all that good stuff in there? Okay, get that down. Get down.
Listen, tell people to subscribe. You got to get in on this.
Yeah, subscribe. This is going to be a great giveaway. Okay, 2293 is the Kittimore Accords. You guys remember the Kittimore Accords?
It's when the movie started, right?
Yeah. You know, it's signing, it's like a peace treaty, Klingons, and it's a whole thing. Okay. Now, 2363 is when the next generation, the Picard Enterprise, the NCC 1701D, starts its 5-year mission. So the Kittimore Accords were at 2293, at 2360. What's that?
Their continuing mission.
Right, sorry. The continuing mission.
Yeah, and so basically 102 years after Kirk started his 5-year mission is when we get, or 98 years, sorry, is when we get Picard and the Enterprise 1701D.
Right.
Okay.
Again, screenshots aren't great, to be honest. Yeah, a lot of this footage is not high quality.
It's a new time, different time.
All right, 2267, only a few years later, we have the Battle of Wolf 359. That is when we were introduced to the Borg Collective.
The Borg.
Right? Captain Picard gets taken, gets turned into a Borg, it's a whole thing. 2267. Cisco commands Deep Space Nine. You notice that these years are the same.
That is so crazy.
Yes, because Cisco's wife was actually murdered at Wolf 359.
Right.
He takes over the Deep Space Nine. In 2371, Voyager is launched.
So that's... Wow. So we're talking, that's 100 years later.
Is that right? Did I mess up the...
I think you got it. It's probably 2271.
Okay. Yeah, I probably messed something up, guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's 20. Yeah, that's okay. Just 2271, and you bumped. You accidentally.
I messed up. I'm sorry, guys. I messed up the. It's not 23. It's 2271. Look. I was up late last night getting this ready. Okay.
Hey, no, it looks really nice, man. I'm impressed. You don't usually put this much into it. I'm really, really stoked.
Okay. So, I'm just gonna go with 22, not 23. 2273 through 75 was the Dominion War. Okay, again, bad screenshots. And in 2278, Voyager comes home via the help of the future Admiral Janeway. Now that we're done with that, this is when it gets wanky, guys. Okay, and 22, I'm assuming it's 22, 78, 87, is when Spock and Nero travel back in time. In an attempt to save Romulus, Spock uses red matter on their sun, and it explodes, makes a whole black hole or something, and it sucks them in, and they go back in time. What's that?
So for all intents and purposes, for the Star Trek universe, essentially for canon purposes, Spock's action here in 2287 is basically the last thing that happens in this universe for us, canon-wise.
Right.
Unless
You're
there's
right.
something in the books I don't know about.
According to the Prime Universe, this is sort of the last thing that happens. We have not yet seen past this moment. I guess we have. In Enterprise, we saw that guy that time traveled back to the Enterprise, but we saw glimpses of the future, right?
Right.
And in Voyager, we saw the time, Section 31 or whatever, the time people, and they were in the future.
Nothing that impacts major characters or major.
Right. We saw glimpses. Yeah. But this is as far as our timeline is concerned, this is basically where it ends, where we don't really see much after this except for glimpses from certain episodes, right?
Okay.
This is what's important because this takes us all the way back to between 2151 and 2265. This is when
say again?
Spock and Nero travel back to sometime between the events of the Federation being founded and Star Trek Discovery. I didn't get a specific date here, but you and I did the math, and according to Kirk's age at the event when the first Star Trek movie happens, it was probably around 2230, right?
Okay.
Right.
You know, it's funny. We actually got a little bit of a boo-boo here, and it's hard because it's hard to read the the numbers inside your thing here. But if you go back to, it does look like it was actually right. If Kirk's 5-year mission was in 2265, the Kittimore Curds was 2293. You've got Picard's Enterprise in 2363. I don't know if you can go back a couple.
Oh, I did. I didn't make a mistake. I did. I made a mistake on the DS9.
Right.
Okay, guys, we're sorry. Yeah. Just ignore that.
Because that slide only showed 22, and I realized Voyager wasn't launched 100 years after Cisco's DS9.
Right. So it's 2367. I messed up. There's a bad number there. Then 2371, 2373. And then,
which is right. Okay.
Right. And accumulating in 2378. And then Spock and Nero in 2387 travel back to sometime between the Federation and the events of Star Trek Discovery. Okay.
And it's pretty easy to figure out if you assume that Kirk is 30 years old when he starts his 5-year mission. You can pretty much guesstimate that you're looking at 2235 is about when the timeline reset.
Yeah, I looked through a lot of clips and I couldn't find any like canon specific time where they mention a star date that they came back to.
Pretty close to, if we don't know when the
I mean, it's possible I missed it, but I went back and watched the 2009 Star Trek movie, at least the first half of it, and I didn't get anything.
Okay. So, yeah. So, keep going.
But we do know that Kirk is an adult when he's an adult at the start of Star Trek, not the start of the movie, but about a few minutes in. It's 2258 according to Pike, right? So technically, this is the Kelvin timeline because when Nero came back in time, he killed the USS Kelvin, which is where Kirk's father was, changing the timeline and splitting the timeline into an alternate timeline called the Kelvin timeline.
Right. And so the Kelvin was actually destroyed in 2233.
Oh.
So that was a couple of years before. So
wow, you were like 2 years off. Where'd you get that information?
It's one of the Memory Alpha wikis.
Oh, well, yeah, let's just assume that's the case. I wasn't in the movie, so let's assume that was the case. Okay, so 2233, and now we're at Star Trek, 2009 Star Trek, with Chris Pine as Kirk. It's 2258. Now, Star Trek Discovery starts at 2256. We are almost 2 years into Discovery. So right now on Discovery, it'd be at 2257, close to 2258. Technically is when that movie starts.
And guess what? If we don't come into season 2 and Vulcan is blown up, then right? Because basically Vulcan is destroyed in 2258 in the Kelvin timeline.
Right.
So they're on their way to Vulcan now.
And they're on their way to Vulcan, and they get a distress call from Pike, which is when Vulcan gets... I mean, it could line up. It's possible it can line up, right?
It could.
Why would Pike be sending out a distress call?
That's the only problem, because most people are saying that this has something to do with the menagerie, the pilot, of course, to the original series. So basically what we're talking about here, guys, and the reason why we're talking about these two timelines is I mean, the reality is that Spock's going back in time and resetting the timeline is canon. So realistically, if Discovery showrunner and the writers are staying with canon, then they technically would have to follow the Kelvin timeline. But if they're dealing with the menagerie version of Pike, then we're not going to be in the Kelvin timeline. So that's why the discussion is going back and forth, and we're trying to figure out maybe what we're going to see for season 2 and what universe are we using.
So let's theorize real quick. Let's say my theory for season 2, if they're gonna go against canon and completely retcon the Kelvin timeline, okay? Let's assume they retcon the Kelvin timeline. They act like those movies didn't even happen.
Okay.
Honestly, that might be a little bit of a bummer for me, but if they did that, okay, then we're going into the menagerie, right? But we're still only a few years away from when TOS technically starts.
9, yeah.
No,
sorry,
less
7.
than 9. 6 or 7. Right. But so that means that there isn't much time, there isn't much they can do in season 2. Unless they plan to break canon further, right?
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to see what else they could do in season 2. I mean, there's so little that's known to happen before TOS started in this little bit of time. I mean, I guess there's some time for them to play with, but they got to be careful of what they do because it impacts canon if they don't.
Okay,
so
if
they mess with it too much.
Is this? Here's a theory. Is this yet another timeline? Let's call it the Discovery timeline or the Spore timeline.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's obviously not the mirror universe like you originally thought.
No, which sort of bums me out. Although it looked like it was going there when they were just giving the Empress all the time and everything she wanted. But let's say when Stamets spored back into our timeline 9 months ahead, right? And basically time traveled. Did he create an alternate timeline the same way Nero and Spock created what appears to be an alternate timeline with the Kelvin universe?
I mean,
and is it alternate or is it a branch? You know?
Well, if they did create an alternate timeline, I guess there's some legitimacy to being able to do that, but they haven't given any indication that that's what's happened.
Okay. So for the future of the show, I almost would rather them had made it, either they make an alternate timeline where we're going forward, we don't know what's going to happen. You know, maybe some familiar stuff happens, but not exactly the same thing. Or they're sticking with the fact that in our prime timeline, our old Spock blew up the Romulan sun and came back, and now we're in the Kelvin timeline. You know, because if they just retcon the Kelvin timeline and stick with the prime timeline, then they're sort of stuck, unless they don't care about breaking canon. They're sort of stuck in what they can do, considering they only have a few years before, like six or 7 years, before we are pretty much aware of what's going on in Starfleet.
Well, I'm pretty sure, I mean, for me personally, I don't think that they're going to go into the Kelvin timeline. I'm pretty sure that it's going back into our prime universe. Because after the show was over, Variety did an interview with Alex Kurtzman where it talked about basically Spock being on that ship when it pulls up. So you can almost assume that from the show, what we're hearing is Pike's on that ship and so is Spock. And this is where the menagerie stuff's coming from. Because basically what Kurtzman says is, and this is kind of something that disappoints me about the fact that they pull the Enterprise up. Kurtzman said, let me give you a little quote real quick. Kurtzman said, the show is called Discovery. It's not Enterprise. So yes, the Enterprise will play a part of season 2, but it will absolutely not overshadow Discovery. And I think with Enterprise's arrival in the finale, we recognize that the audience has a lot of questions about our synchronicity, their syncing of the episodes of the series with the original series, which really means, are we syncing with canon? So the promise of the Enterprise holding the answers to a lot of those questions, including Spock's relationship with his half-sister, Michael Burnham, who's never mentioned, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to see Spock, just that we owe you an answer to that question. So what's happening here, from what I'm gathering from this quote, is basically like we don't have to show you Spock. We just need to give you an answer about their relationship, and we don't need to tell you exactly what's going on.
Right.
So part of me feels like they just dangled it in front of us like a carrot to close out the finale and get us to season 2. And you're probably just going to see a speck of the Enterprise in the beginning of the next season, and then move on with what Discovery's doing. But based on them saying that Spock is basically on the Enterprise, because Spock, you got to remember, in the Kelvin timeline, he's an instructor at Starfleet right now.
Right. Right.
So he's not on board the Enterprise until 58, when they're racing to save Vulcan, basically, from being destroyed by Nero.
Right.
Right. So either right now they're on their way to save Vulcan, and that's when they're hitting Discovery on the way there, or Spock's on board for the Menagerie show.
Okay. Yeah, those are only 2 options, apparently.
That's it.
I mean,
Or they started a whole new timeline.
Unless they start a whole new timeline, and those aren't the only 2 options.
Right.
All right, so those are our theories, guys. Either what Shane just said, either they're on the way to Vulcan, or they're starting the Menagerie, or it's another timeline completely, and we have no idea what's going to happen.
What would you like to see happen into season 2? Where would you like to see him go?
Yeah, that's actually a question for people watching. Like, let us know below. What do you want? Where do you want Discovery to go for season 2? What would you like to see? Questions answered that maybe it weren't answered with the original series in TNG. For me personally, I want to know more about the Iconians. It's a fascinating topic. I've done a lot of research into the Iconians because it's interesting, and there's almost not even enough reason. There's not even enough content for me to make a video about them. Can
you talk about them a little bit for people who may not know who they are?
Yeah, the Iconians were, if you remember, the gateway in TOS, that doorway that led them into the past, and in a couple of the books that were in there. They were also in they were like, I don't know if they're the founders of the universe or what, but they built a lot of the technology. They're not here anymore, and they built a bunch of technology that is super OP, dealing with transporting across space and time. Answers some, if you apply Iconians to some of the beings we met in TOS and TNG, that answers a lot of questions. Look up Iconians on the Star Trek wiki, and you'll get more information. There's not much there, to be honest. We do know that they built the gateway that led back in time, and they have some serious OP technology. And also, when it looked to me in the third episode or 4th episode of Discovery, when he was showing her the spore drive, when she was in the capsule, it looked like she was on a world for a brief moment that had those gateways and stuff. It looked like an Iconian type world. So I actually thought they might go into that. Who knows? Maybe they'll save it for season 2, or maybe they don't. Maybe they just continually tease us and they never give us any answers regarding the Iconians.
There's one more quote I wanted to go over real quick about the ending of season 1, and it really leaves a question. Basically, Kurtzman said that this entire first season was reverse engineered from the ending that they knew they wanted. That feels so false to me. Because of the rush at the end. They said they basically ended the show the way they wanted it ended, and then worked backwards. And the show didn't feel that way, and so that's really interesting that they decided to do it that way. So going into season 2, and by the way, I'm not sure that's 100% true. I'm just going to be honest. I don't know if that statement is correct, because I just don't see how it can be. But going into season 2, what do they got? They can chase Giorgio down a little bit. They can play with Harry Mudd some more.
Yeah.
Do the Iconians like you suggested. But the problem is,
I just looked up the wiki for that, and apparently in the Discovery episode Choose Your Pain, the Iconians were mentioned by name on a tactical map on the bridge of the U.S. Discovery. So
you could go there.
Yeah. And just to be clear, they were also in an episode of TNG called Contagion, an episode of DS9 To the Death, usually explaining away certain languages, relics or technologies that weren't explained.
They've been a great tool of the series, and it would be brave, I think, to tackle that. But honestly, it should be tackled at some point. I don't know. I mean, Discovery, and if they want to mess with canon some more, they can't do a whole lot. They can't do too much big stuff. They can't really save the universe, and have it not somehow affect things that we already know about Star Trek. And so I think that's the limitation that they're in right now. So, I'm not sure what I want to see. If they're not going to give us Spock, if they're not going to give us Kirk, if we're not going to get to see the characters Pike, and from what I understand, they're not even looking into casting any of those actors for those roles.
They're not being casted. Right.
They're not being casted. So we're not going to see anybody. So, and I get the show's about Discovery. I get that. But what's the point? I mean, you can't mess with too much stuff. I mean, I know there were other ships out there doing other things, so that's fine. But they might just be better off starting their own timeline.
Right. Although what you said about there were other ships out there doing other stuff, right? The entire Star Trek universe wasn't just about the Enterprise, right?
Right.
I get that part. That's cool. But obviously the Enterprise did play very important roles throughout the history. That was basically, Enterprise is almost like its own character, and we basically followed that character throughout. Yeah. And when Voyager...
The Enterprise was the flagship of the fleet.
Right. And when they sent Voyager to the Delta Quadrant, that was genius because it allowed them to tell a story without interrupting or getting involved with the Enterprise and that portion of the universe that we're so well known,
Right.
So I'm fascinated about what they're going to do. Obviously, other ships were having adventures too. Obviously. Discovery was one of those ships. We get that. We get that 100%. And I guess they could just continue on as if the Kelvin timeline never started. Have a little blip with Enterprise and continue their mission. And maybe they go through stuff that, wouldn't affect the 5-year missions and all that, But the technology needs, technology needs to sync up. And big events. So you can't have a massive Klingon war during that 5-year mission, because then why would have, or Romulan War or something, then why would have Kirk not been there? Why would, why would the flagship of the Starfleet wouldn't have been at such a very important part of saving the Federation,
and one of the arguments against this not being in the Kelvin timeline is essentially you have this huge Klingon war that decimates the Federation, and then 6 months later, you've got the events of the first Star Trek movie in the Kelvin timeline, where Spock, where Spock and Kirk and everybody, the whole crew come together. So when Vulcan explodes, basically, is that 6 months after the entire, the Federation's been decimated by a Klingon war? Well, it wasn't mentioned in the movies. It didn't seem like that, based on what we saw. So,
although the movies were definitely breakneck pace, they didn't have a whole lot of chance to sit down and talk. Like, it was just happening really quickly.
Feels like, I guess it's possible. It just wouldn't feel very realistic considering 6 months before, millions of people were killed, basically. So
yeah, okay. So let's wrap this up. I'm gonna give you my official theory. My official theory is probably the same as yours, Shane. We're gonna start the next season with the Enterprise being a blip. They have a little meeting or something, maybe a holographic version of the back of Spock's head talking to Burnham or something, right?
Right.
Which, by the way, in itself, a holographic version of Spock would definitely bother me.
I think Spock's going to be off the ship maybe
they're going to talk to Pike or the back of it's going to be like you're going to see Burnham from like the back of their head. Good to see you again, sister, or something like that.
Right.
And then they're going to talk about. They're going to exchange some information, and then they're going to go on their way, and we're going to see the new adventures of Discovery, and maybe it will become more episodic, and the overwhelming, the underlying arc of the story will be something, sinister, but not like Federation changing. You know what I mean? Or maybe the spore drive malfunctions and they get thrown into another, universe or something like that. It'll be something that won't affect the Federation. That's how they can do this, and that's what I think they'll do. And that way they don't even have to tell you what timeline they're in.
Fair enough.
What do you think?
Well, I think what's going to happen is I think Spock's not going to be there. I think that they're probably going to be coming back, maybe from the I wish we could have got the timeline on when Menagerie happened. I don't remember off the top of my head how many years it was, but I know that when Kirk takes over as the Enterprise, he knew Pike and knew the story. I don't know if it was 10 years or 9 years before. So I wish I had that information at my fingertips. But if it is the Menagerie, then perhaps it isn't even Pike at all commanding the ship at that moment. It might, and Spock may be with him. They might be off the ship somewhere, so they can cast other people to speak for him. Oh, Captain Pike was injured on
Wait a minute.
They might do that thing.
Captain Pike sent the distress call.
Was it Captain Pike?
Yeah.
Or was it?
They said him by
the
name.
Enterprise commanded by Captain Pike.
Yeah. Oh, maybe. Yeah. We'll have to go back and look. Yeah.
I mean, it could be, but what I'm saying is, if they want to get away, if they want to skirt the issue completely, which is what I feel like they're probably going to do. But I'm thinking that it's probably has something to do with the Menagerie. We get that little Easter egg. I don't know how Discovery is going to help them. But there's going to be a short interaction there, and then I think you're right. They're going to move on with the series. And I don't know what they're going to do. Who's going to be the baddie? What's going to happen? Where they're going to go? I'm guessing we're going to get more of the Empress. That's probably got to happen. I'm guessing we're going to get more of Harry Mudd. I hope it's more episodic. I don't know if it's going to completely follow Michael Burnham. We're going to get a new captain,
right,
of the Discovery. That's going to be a huge issue.
Yeah.
And right now, there's a lot of people saying maybe Spock will be the new captain. No, Spock is not going to be the new captain.
No, if they did that, it'd be the worst thing ever.
Yeah, it would be terrible.
Like, I would love to see Spock in any version, but honestly, like, that's just totally just crapping all over the canon. Like, that would be the worst thing would have Spock be the captain. That'd be the worst thing ever. Honestly.
Okay, well, apparently what I've been reading about is that around this time, Pike was finishing his 5-year mission aboard the Enterprise. Apparently, he's not going to be wounded until 2267 for the Menagerie. So 2267, well, that's doesn't make a whole lot of sense because that's 2 years after Kirk's 5-year mission. So something's not matching up. But it's interesting. So some people are thinking Pike's going to be the new captain of the Enterprise.
And he just
I've already heard that
he never gets deformed or whatever.
Maybe that's what happens because it's not going to be until further into the future. But I mean, nobody really knows for sure. But that's one indication is maybe it'll be Pike. Maybe that's what they're leading to. It is kind of weird that they said we're on our way to meet our new captain, and then nothing kind of happened with that. We're on our way to
right.
He's the acting.
Wait, well, they're on their way to meet the new captain, and Sarek is tagging along because he needs a ride back to Vulcan.
Right.
And they sort of retcon the spore drive. They said, like, until we get like a computer way of using the spore drive, they've shelved it or something. Remember that? So
yeah, they're not going to use it no more.
Honestly, though, you have Stamets there with the ability to use it, and you're not going to use it. Get out of here.
Right?
Get out of here. Oh, Starfleet said don't use it anymore until we can find a computer. Are you kidding me? Stamets, he's already there. He's already plugged in, dude.
He's like, I'm on board for that. Yeah, I remember. Maybe, you know what? I'm really hoping they do. Let's go Section 31 with Discovery.
Yes, go full Section 31.
I'm okay with that. They can pretty much do any story they want. They can stay outside of the timeline. They have the ability to go past, present, future, right? Maybe
Right.
they never really explained Section 31's ability to time travel. Maybe the spore drive is the reason they can time travel.
Oh yeah, Shane, you just came up with a great theory, man.
That's
Bro.
That's what I would like to see it go.
Okay, this is the start of Section 31. Hence the black badges, the spore drive technology that's classified to the rest of Starfleet. Their knowledge of the mirror universe that was also classified, right?
Right.
The Kelpian on board that we've never seen before. Section 31 can explain a lot, and it'd be fascinating to say Star Trek Discovery is the start of Section 31.
31, yeah. There
We've
you go.
heard about it.
There's my season 2.
We've heard about it for 40 years, and finally you're going to see the story about the start and the adventures of Section 31. That'd be sick. That'd be sick. I would totally take that.
All right, well, let's hope that happens, and let's hear what you guys think we're going to have for season 2. What's going down?
Yeah. And what do you think about the Section 31 theory? I wasn't even going to talk about that today, but thank you for bringing that up, Shane. I appreciate that.
All right.
All right, guys, comment below. Let us know what you think is going to happen in season 2. Let us know if we're wrong about something. Like, did I get my dates wrong? Or what?
Yeah, we did get the dates wrong, but we got to fix somewhere.
Yeah, let me know if I messed something up.
You did good, bro. You did good.
I couldn't even take full credit. I stole a lot of this information from like a ton of other clips and YouTube videos. So, anyways, let us know below. Have a conversation with us. Have a great week. Don't forget, we are doing Black Panther review on Friday. Shane is going out of town, so it'll be me and a guest. So come back for that. Yeah, bye, Shane. He's going to go out of town. He's going to go and
I'll be back in time to do the boxing.
Ski the slopes. He's going to ski the slopes.
Maybe sled down the slopes.
Maybe roll down the slopes.
We're going to build a snowman around.
But him and I will be back next week for the boxing, and I'll be back on Friday for the Black Panther review. So we'll see you then. Until then, have a great week.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day. Yeah. Love you, babe.